welcome to the Shakacast number 3. Repping the squad today, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. I swear, like, not just the system of 10th Planet, but the people behind it. You know, the coaches, the mindset, the community and camaraderie, the family that I get from the group behind this symbol right here is something that I haven't felt since the military. And I say that 100%. Just happy to wear the colors. I've been working a lot on flexibility and trying to go side to side with my hips from the bottom. Like when you talk about open guard and closed guard position, being able to drop my hips to the outside of someone else's hips when I'm on that bottom position, and making my rubber guard more effective with just like flexibility. Being able to make sure that every time someone gets in my rubber guard, they have to escape an arm bar, they have to escape a triangle, they have to escape a omoplata before they can get out of that full-on rubber guard. I feel like I've been doing a better job with it, but you know, these things take time. These things take time. The topic for today, this is actually in pretty close succession between the one I just did, the Shakacast I did just a couple days ago, but I feel like it's important that I get this out there, because over the weekend we had one of the deadliest weekends that America has seen. And when I say America has seen, it's on a couple of perspectives, right? America's population is the highest that it's been in a long time, so there's more opportunity for a deadly weekend. But to the other end of that, the media is more active now than it's ever been. It's more targeted now than it's ever been. You know, everybody's got their ear out and open, listening to that, listening for that next horrific event to hit. And this just so happened to be a multi-city horrific event that was completely uncoordinated. You know, there was a mass murder in El Paso with I think it was an assault rifle. There was a mass murder in Ohio, and then there were 57 shootings, or 57 people shot in Chicago. And every time we hear about a mass shooting, we should feel an emptiness. You know, there should be a crushing feeling to it. But I feel like the difficult thing for me when it comes to this last shooting is that I didn't get hit by it as much as I had been hit by the previous announcements, which is weird because it's the biggest one, you know. The damage that happened over this weekend was more significant than that Orlando nightclub thing, which at that time had been the largest mass killing since Jonestown. And everybody's saying, you know, we need to do something about this. So I wanted to use my problem solving process to kind of break this down and maybe discuss an option that we have on how to do something about it. First and foremost, if you're going to do something about a problem, you have to understand why you're doing something about that problem. Because if you're going to do something, you have to be committed to doing it. You have to have a reason to be committed to doing it. So I think it's important that we understand how devastating a mass killing is. And I think it's important to call it a mass killing rather than a mass shooting. Because if the person had a missile, the trigger to a missile or bombs or the ability to commit arson instead of doing what they did with a gun, I feel like they would have taken that route instead. It's the person who commits the crime that needs to be stopped. But we wanna solve this problem because of the loss of life. And personally, I didn't understand the gravity of loss of life until I was an adult. As a kid, I did lose my grandmother. Like, I was super young. I'd say I was 7 or 8. But at the time, my parents had explained to me that my grandmother had gone to heaven. She was in a better place. And when I think about that time period, I do remember there being a sadness, but I was a little sheltered, and I was super Christian. So like, if she went to heaven, then she was okay, and there was no reason to be sad. So I felt like as a kid that there was a weird dichotomy between those two ideas. So I just stayed committed to what my parents told me, and understood that she was in a happier place. I'd say that my second serious encounter with loss of life was the one that truly helped me to understand how important an individual life is, the gravity that an individual life can have to a group of people. When I got into the military, I wasn't necessarily close to a lot of people for whatever reason. But people used to always talk about when you go into the military, you're going to find a friendship that you're going to have for the rest of your life, And going through boot camp and SOI, I hadn't found that type of friendship that they were talking about, right? But I saw these group of guys. There were these 3 guys. And by the end of SOI, these guys were like blood brothers, just tight, close, When they left SOI, they went to different parts of the country. 2 of those guys went over to California with me, and then one of those guys went over to North Carolina. And obviously, I'm not using their names out of respect for them, but even though they were on different sides of the country, SOI is not that long, by the way. SOI is the School of Infantry. It's the course you take after you leave boot camp on the way to becoming Marine Corps rifleman with a designated skill, right? Machine gunner, assaultman, so on and so forth. But SOI ain't that long. And these guys just developed this deep, welded blood bond between each other. And I truly believed that it made them better. Watching them interact with each other competitively, watching them grow around each other and learn from each other and develop each other just from their closest that they had caught in such a short period of time. To me, that bond that they had was a miracle because they came from different parts of the country. They just got together and they just melded. And by the time we were deployed, it was about 2 years down the road, and those guys had never lost contact. They would talk to each other on Skype, just brothers through and through. And one of the guys deployed before the other 2, and he ended up losing his life overseas. And I'll never forget the other 2 because I had deployed with the other 2. And, like I said, this was fascinating to me that they had built this bond in such a short period of time. And in the midst of watching them and how they interacted, I was learning from them how a bond like that would look, so that I would know when I had something like that, so that I could grow and develop with someone the way that they had, because I truly believed in my heart that it made them better. And they lost one of their trio, and I'll just never forget the change of energy that happened on that entire side of the barracks, just because of the difference that happened in those two people when their friend passed. I'd never seen people affected like that. I'd never experienced anything like that. Up to that point, I hadn't. And I just remember thinking, these three guys had completely intended on growing and developing together. Their families knew each other after the School of Infantry, the SOI. Their brothers and sisters knew each other. They would call each other for support. Just from the bond of these three people, entire families came together. And all of that was cut short. And it was, for me, like the only way that I would be able to experience the way that something that they had experienced, I would say would only be to experience what they had experienced. Just the value in that bond and that connection, and to have that taken away, and to see how it affected them. That completely changed my idea of the value of life, because it, instead of seeing it as that person could have done so much, it became for me, that person affected so many people, and they could have done so much with so many people. The impact that one individual can have over their lifetime, and the fact that that could be cut short by someone's stupidity, it's a devastating tragedy every time. And with these mass killings, it's happening to 10 and 20 people at a time. Think about the hundreds of people affected, the hundreds of families. And then you add on the fact that a lot of the people of our generation, millennials and below, are soft. It is what it is. So you got the anxiety increase for an entire generation of people, given that the stories blasted over the airwaves so many times. That's what needs to stop. That's why we want these mass killings to stop. That's what gives it gravity and purpose. So now we understand why we want these things to stop. Why are they happening? There's a trend with these people who commit mass killings. And the trend is that they spend a lot of time on the internet. And I think it's important for us to understand what's going on with the internet right now. Every person has what's called an information bubble. And within that information bubble, people's ideas are repeated back to them in a sort of self-approving circle, right? Like if you are a person who believes in the flat earth theory, and you talk about the flat earth theory, videos about the flat earth theory would be sent to you by the internet. Advertisements about it, and advertisements about books about the topic would be sent to you over the internet. It would refer events to you, and completely outside of your handle. Like this is just advertisement, targeted advertisement that's able to be committed by companies like Facebook, Google, and so on and so forth. So that repeat of the same story back to you over and over again kind of narrows your line of thinking to the same point which people felt before the internet existed. I think it's weird because the internet was made to bring everybody together, but it's very plain to see how these targeted information bubbles and how they restrict our line of sight towards each other from person to person has completely isolated a lot of people. And I think inherently there are a lot of people who are isolated, whether it be because of shame or because of their inability to be able to adapt to social cues or whatever's wrong with them, whatever's wrong with them. And I think within the internet, sometimes those types of people can get within a spiral of themselves. And you see these weird groups of people spiraling within themselves on Reddit pages, ultra left, ultra right, political parties, people who are trying to fight for a cause, like the warriors of PETA and stuff like that. And they start to further delve down into this cone of a group who has ideas that are just out of line. The crazy thing is, every time somebody commits a mass killing, the media quickly informs us of the different groups that they were in online and the different affiliations that they had politically and so on and so forth. And I think the crazy thing is, right now we're saying that, because he's a right-winger, this is a part of right-wing ideology. That's for the guy who was in El Paso. I don't know about the other two, but when you say that, you commit an entire political party, essentially probably 20% of the nation, to a mass murderer. That type of verbiage doesn't do anything but divide us. That's not how we solve the problem. That group, isolated within itself, within its negative ideas, is an isolated group deep within it's like under the fingernails of the entirety of that political party. Why is this happening? One of the reasons why this is happening is because we continue to divide ourselves within those subgroups, and those people who are divided within those subgroups and marginalized to the most that they can do so, I think feel comfortable with the horrific ideas that they come up with. I think in the armpit of the internet, there are people who are encouraging these people to express themselves in ways that involve hurting others and killing people. So that's for me the best way to explain why it's happening. It is a trend. It is a trend. Whenever someone commits a mass murder, there's someone online communicating with them, helping them to develop their ideas, and during that end point, eventually they say that they're going to do this sick thing, and then they end up doing it. So why should we stop it? Why is it happening? That, for me, that's the biggest reason why, and I want to approach that why with a resolution. Like, what can we do to solve that why? How can we unravel those cones, those information bubbles, so that people can get a wider view of how horrible it would be to cause the loss of a life. And I think the very easy way to handle a situation like this is to point the finger at the government and say, you need to do something. These people shouldn't have guns. These people shouldn't have access to weapons. These people shouldn't have blah, blah, blah. But what we have to understand is that legislation does not change behavior. It's the enforcement of legislation that changes behavior. So even if there is legislation that's written to change something, that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll change something, because how easy is it to enforce the restriction of somebody's ability to get a gun, and that's not a political statement. That's a fact. People who are not permitted to have certain guns have certain guns. It's not politics. That's fact. So if legislation can't change behavior, we have to take responsibility as individual people and change our behavior. What do I mean by that? We have to be comfortable with communicating with strangers about shit that just doesn't matter. I think it's extremely important that you say hi to strangers, because the consistent thing about people who are willing to kill other people is that at the end of them killing a lot of people, they know what's going to happen. You're either going to go to jail for the rest of your life, or you're going to get shot and killed. They've made a decision and committed themselves to death before they even started that event. So that means two things. That means that they have no value, they have no consideration for the purpose of the lives that they take prior to them giving that action. But the other side of that is that they don't give any clout, purpose, or value to their own lives and the direction that their own lives could take, the benefit that their own lives could give to other people. And the only way that they could know is by seeing it. I think it's weird, unless you have you're never gonna process out of the human psyche all psychopaths, right? Psychopaths are gonna exist. Those people should be culled. They don't belong, but they exist. That's a fact. But at the end of the day, they are only 0.1 or 0.01, however super small percentage of the population that they are. And the people that are committing these murders are weak. This isn't Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, that is out here committing mass murders. And it isn't over there either. Baghdadi rarely does some bullshit unless he's one-on-one with somebody. Well, not one-on-one, but like 5-on-1 with somebody, because he's a bitch too. But we have to understand that if people begin to see the value in themselves and feel as though they can be committed to something that's greater than the four walls of their home, then the idea of harming others for any reason becomes unacceptable to them. Because how are you going to be out making life-changing decisions, committing yourself to death, essentially, because 20 years in prison, that's like death. You're not going to be the same person anymore, or you're going to get shot and die. So, it's a lot harder to commit yourself to death if you feel as though there's something that you could do that would improve either your life or the lives of the people around you. Um, I want to kind of relate this to something I noticed in the Middle East when I was deployed. There's a ban in the Helmand province, okay, where, well, and everywhere that the Taliban or a Islamic extremist group thrives, there is a ban on Western movies, literature, and media. And a lot of people say that that's because they don't want people to, they say that it's because they don't want people to commit to that American like style. You know, they don't want people to wear jeans, quote unquote. But the reason why they don't want people to read Western literature is much greater than that. The reason why they want people to listen or consume American media comes from a story of a Palestinian girl who became incredible at a sport because she watched one Rocky movie and her dad got behind her when it comes to that sport, supported her, and she drew all of her courage and drive to do this sport and get committed to that sport because she watched one Rocky movie. There were death threats against her. They were following her, burning the houses that they were staying in as they were hiding and moving from place to place because she wanted to do one sport. And that was all because she watched one Rocky movie. And the thing is about these people, before they commit themselves to death, is that I wonder what would have happened if they had watched their Rocky movie? What would have happened to those people if they had an understanding that they could fall in love with something more so than they felt that the rest of humanity had hated them? So I think that's what a lot of those people think. I think they think that there are people who just don't like them, and they're always against somebody, or the world's against them, and they're trying to make a statement by causing damage to the world because the world's abused them. And for a lot of people, that does seem to be the case. Their world did abuse them before they committed whatever act that they committed. But at the end of the day, regardless of your past, if you find something and you fall in love with it, if you find your Rocky movie and you use that as your motivation to push yourself to another level with something that you truly care about, the idea of completely caging yourself in a box for the rest of your life, or the idea of completely losing your life, just changes your ability to put yourself up for the opportunity to go through that. Wrapping everything up. And I'm sorry, guys. It's a hard topic for me. It really is. But wrapping everything up, what's happening? People are losing their lives. Why is it happening? It's happening because people don't understand the value of life. It's happening because there are information bubbles where people are siphoning themselves into small groups of sick-minded people. And it just so happens that at the bottom of that cycle, that tornado, that cone, the bottom of that cone ends with someone who's audacious enough to commit an act that would rip the lives of people's families apart. What is the solution? It's not always a government thing. The government can help, but at the end of the day, we must change our behavior. We must be committed to making sure that we benefit, or not just benefit, but show good to the people that are around us, to the extent that possibly they can understand how much positive that there is in the world, so that they would be afraid to take that away, but they would also be inspired to create their own form of positivity within themselves and possibly the world. The proper resolution would be to help people to find their Rocky movie and grow off of it, so they understand that when they, or if they get that turn to commit and act like they did, if they get that urge, they would understand what they would be taking away from people and their families. I just wanted to give a shout out to the American soldier who saved lives in El Paso. I wanted to say condolences, respect, love, and blessings to the families who lost people during the shootings. And that's all I got for this podcast. But I just wanted to get it out there. So maybe this will help something. I don't know. Thanks, guys.